It's hard to find other NES games that approach that level of creativity.
What's the greatest NES game of all time? Super Mario Bros? Or perhaps it's Mega Man 2? Or even The Legend of Zelda? But what if I told you one of its greatest games was one that not only shattered the perception of what you could achieve on the NES, but was also, most likely, a game you've never heard of?
How is this a Nintendo game?
I had no idea the game existed.
Det här är spelet som ingen ville ha.
Gimmick was a Nintendo Entertainment System masterpiece, but despite acclaim, including praise by industry legends like Miyamoto and Sakurai, it was almost immediately forgotten, and outside of Japan was only ever released in one small Scandinavian pocket of the West. One Swedish fan though, not only loved Gimmick, he obsessed over it, setting up his own studio with the lifelong goal of creating the sequel it deserved and finally exposing Gimmick to the world.
It needs to be modernized.
To work on Gimmick 2, it was like a once-in-a-lifetime experience, right?
Yep, I want to be involved.
But the journey wasn't easy. From being laughed out of a pitch to mass layoffs threatening the studio's very existence, the path to Gimmick 2 has been as tricky as its notoriously difficult predecessor.
Should we just close down or should we struggle?
How do I handle this? How do I feel? What am I supposed to feel?
It was one of the darkest days, I think.
I'm not blaming Embracer for what happened.
It was heartbreaking.
This is the inside story of Gimmick, the greatest forgotten NES game, and its unexpected 2024 sequel. Despite its relative obscurity, Gimmick is appreciated. It's regularly mentioned in top lists by hardcore NES enthusiasts, and original copies trade on eBay for ungodly amounts of money. Iconic Nintendo game director Shigeru Miyamoto said it was fun, which is extremely high praise from someone who rarely, if at all, praises other people's games. And Kirby and Super Smash Bros. Visionary Masahiro Sakurai said Gimmick was a technical marvel. But what is it about Gimmick that's so revered? Why do hardcore fans and industry legends worship a game about a green, star-throwing blob called Yumitaro?
I can't think of another platformer on the NES that has anything close to the mechanics of this game.
It just did a lot of things to stand out where it felt like it was offering an experience that was unique.
It's aged like so well, just such an impressive game.
The way you attack is you charge up the star and you throw it at enemies. And then the wild part is that you can ride the star. You have a thing that's a platform and a weapon at the same time, basically.
And what's amazing about the star attack is that it's based seemingly on realistic physics. It deflects off of objects and enemies. It bounces, it dissipates in its energetic field, it loses energy.
Using your projectile as a way of defeating your enemies and also a platform was unheard of.
The physics on that thing are just so insane, and you can really like stretch it so far. It just makes the game so endlessly replayable.
Every level is different. Like in Super Mario, they reuse like the sprites and the tile sets for a lot of levels. But here, every level is unique.
In each stage of Gimmick, there's at least one moment that seems added to give you a sense of enjoyment that doesn't affect the rest of the game.
For example, on the second level with the pirate ship, if you manage to get to the boss early, the boss is still asleep.
There's like a tooth monster who just walks around very slowly. He doesn't chase you. And what happens when the star hits him, it doesn't damage it. It just stops, turns to you, and just looks at you for 1 second, and then continues to walk. It tells a story within the game by just these simple sprites.
There's these two sprites at the beginning of level, and it's basically a guy playing with his dog. The dog gets excited for you holding onto the star. It treats it like you're holding onto a ball. It'll wag its tail, and it'll come after you, and it wants you to throw the star. And the guy, he doesn't want to be in your business. He backs off and stays away. The fact that they're not even trying to attack you just adds this extra layer to it where they feel like these living creatures in the game. They're not just obstacles.
In the second stage, you can knock out the spiny turtle enemy. If you then jump on the legs of the character, it'll kick you in the opposite direction, like it's realistically pushing you off of the enemy. And there's no real gameplay reason for that to exist in the game. It's just a cute little touch that, again, I can't think of other games that would go through the effort to do something like that. When people say, oh, give me your top 5 or 10 NES games, I firmly believe that Gimmick would always be on those lists had it been released here.
It's like Kirby's Adventure in the quality level, except that no one really knows about it. How?
Gimmick fans know it's special, but despite being a critical hit, it never reached an audience large enough to help it gain commercial success. Outside of Japan and Sweden, Gimmick, or Mr. Gimmick as it was known in Sweden, was never released. And even in those 2 countries where it actually made it to shelves, it was limited. Even Swedish staff working on a sequel hadn't heard of it originally.
It's obscure everywhere, I think.
I had no idea the game existed. I think even those that were growing up at the time when it came out didn't hear about it that much.
I first heard of Gimmick through actually this YouTube channel. It was a Swedish retro gaming channel. I grew up playing Nintendo games, right? And I never played Gimmick as a child.
In 2011, I did a Pat the NES Punk video review of it, and I think that was likely, for some people, their first ever experience and exposure to Mr. Gimmick and learning about the game.
So why was Gimmick, despite its apparent quality, never released in the West? Perhaps it arrived too late into the NES's lifecycle, or was an unfortunate victim of cost-saving measures. According to Sunsoft's former Vice President of Development in America, David Siller, the company's managers felt the game's characters were too strange or quirky. For a game aimed at children, this, paired with its difficulty level, perhaps didn't present well for its target audience. That's right, Gimmick is hard. Like, really hard.
Gimmick is difficult. Even for an NES game, it's on the higher level.
Oh, here's a game that looks cute and colorful, probably most analogous to Kirby on the NES, but Kirby was more reasonable to get through. You know, the Gimmick is very tough. Despite its cute looks, it's more of a Castlevania than it is a Kirby.
It was a very brutal game, a very hard game.
When I saw it, oh, this looks like it's fun to play. But then when you play, it's like, wow, this is difficult.
But I wasn't expecting it to give me as much of a hard time as I did when I started playing it.
The difficulty of Mr. Gimmick was actually one of its advertising features. This is from the back of the box. Every game you played before has only prepared you for this ultimate challenge. You'll call on many skills, techniques, and tricks you've learned to help Mr. Gimmick survive the evil onslaught. Only the strong will survive, and only the very best will experience the secret ending. So they're preparing you for how much of a slog that this game was going to be.
Despite the positive critical reception Gimmick has received over time, its inevitable lack of commercial success never presented an opportunity for a sequel. Gimmick, like many forgotten gems of its era, faded into obscurity, with its creator Sunsoft leaving Yumataro to gather decades worth of dust. 30 years later though, one Swedish fan had different ideas.
My name is Niklas Isternes and I'm the CEO and founder of Bitwave Games. I didn't own the game, I played it at a friend's house and he didn't really own the game as well. He borrowed it from his cousin or something. But I truly remember the star mechanic and the characters in the game. They were so much alive compared to other games, like they could actually react to what you did. When I started to collect games and I actually bought the cart and I was like, yeah, this game. I loved this game. I remember I loved this game, and then I watched speedruns. I watched people like highlighting the secrets and stuff like that on the game, and I was like so intrigued in like how much details there is in this game, who's just developed by like 5 persons or something. That was like my go-to title when people came over and wanted, oh, I see you have a retro collection. I'm like, you need to play this game, and I always brought out my Gimmick first and let them play that one.
The first time I played it was Niklas's Famicom cartridge, actually.
I was introduced to it by Niklas a few years back. He's always loved the Nintendo way of doing. This game captured some of that.
It was clear that Nicholas was a super fan of Gimmick, and that was reinforced when visiting the Bitwave office in February of 2023. But the dots still needed connecting. How had this small, Swedish developer, who at the time had only released one game called Picto Party on the Wii U, been allowed to create the sequel to a forgotten, Japanese Nintendo cult classic?
I still don't really understand how we nabbed this one, but I'm really happy we did. He tried reaching out to Sunsoft back in 2017.
I couldn't read Japanese. I had no idea if Sunsoft was still around. So I was like, maybe they're bankrupt or something. Maybe they don't care anymore about their old IPs. Maybe this is something that I could actually do a sequel to this game that I love. So I wrote not even a pitch. It was like more of like, hey, do you still have this IP? We're interested in doing a sequel. Like, what's the royalty cost? Yada, yada, yada. And my proposition, I don't remember what it was in yen, 2 million or something like that. $10 or $15,000. That was my proposition of getting like the rights to the IP. And they're like, no, that's like small fry for us. You're a nobody. You made a party game on Wii U. No way you're getting like one of our most cherished IPs. I don't know what I expected. Like I think it was a shot in the dark, basically. But I was like, I need to try.
Nicholas's attempt was bold and certainly naive. He explained that Bitwave Games, then known as Retroid Interactive, was built on a foundation of his love for Gimmick. He would often wax lyrically about the forgotten platformer to his colleagues, and it appeared his hopes of making a sequel were now dashed. But a few years later, there was a glimmer of hope.
I remember seeing Blaster Master Zero, and that actually sparked some hope, because that's a Sunsoft IP, and that's like, oh wait, they're doing reboots now?
Unfortunately, the period of hope coincided with a downturn in the company's fortunes, with the impact of the pandemic threatening their very survival.
A lot of thought of like, okay, should we just close down or should we struggle? Should I just scale down to like a 2-man operation or a 1-man operation even? I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I reached out to some friends for porting gigs, and I reached out to Raw Fury. I had a friend working there called Martin Lindell.
Martin Lindell, though, was leaving Raw Fury and could offer no work to help keep Bitwave afloat. But by hook and crook, the company managed to survive just long enough for Martin to offer a different kind of lifeline.
And then during the summer of 2020, Martin came back and he was like, I started Embracer. Could you pitch your company to us? The vision of my company was to do the sequel of Gimmick, so that's what I'm gonna pitch.
Embracer not only liked what Bitwave had to offer, but were on board with trying to get the rights to a Gimmick sequel, and immediately got to work putting Nicholas in front of Sunsoft to pitch the concept after an undisclosed, but no doubt significantly improved offer.
I couldn't even see how they reacted because it was very small, window in Teams, and they were all wearing face masks and they were like nodding. I was like, I have no idea like how they're feeling about this pitch and stuff like that. And the translator had issues with her camera, so she had to turn it off, and then it was like her default image was a cat image, so it was like a cat who was translating it. It was just weird. They could feel my passion for the game, and I think that's what truly nailed it in the end.
Finally, a lifelong dream could be realised. Bitwave Games could now create a sequel to this long-forgotten masterpiece. There was just one problem. They now had to make a game that not only honoured the original, but that surpassed it.
The original vision was like, okay, let's do what this game did very good and just do it better.
Bitwave Games finally got the go-ahead to make a sequel to Gimmick, and at last, Nicholas could finally begin to put ideas to paper that had been rattling around in his Gimmick-infused brain for decades.
There's a lot of physics-based games, which is like fun to play by just like watching, a tower fall. Like look at Angry Birds. Those kinds of things would make perfect sense in a title such as this.
I was looking forward to keeping the feel of the original, but in a modern way. I saw a lot of potential.
I want it to stand on its own. I want it to be a fun platforming game. I want it to be accessible, but I also really, really want it to be a true sequel. I don't want them to feel like we've massacred their boy or something. Like it should be like, wow, they really took this to a new direction, but still, it's still Gimmick.
We will try to keep the spirit of the game close to the original, but we want to make it our own as well.
Everyone just wants this game to be as amazing as possible.
The passion for the project in the Bitwave office was undeniable, but so was the love of the original. Nicholas was proud of the space, particularly his treasured retro collection. And of course, the items that took pride of place were his valuable original editions of Gimmick.
So I bought the PAL version first. It was like $250 or something. But this guy who sold it, he had no idea what he had on his hands. Like he was cleaning his mother's basement or something. Oh, a bunch of NES games which I played when I was young. I'm gonna sell these on Tradera, who is like the eBay equivalent in Scandinavia. He was like, I need to ask you, because all of the games I sold, they were like $10 each. And this was $250. Like, what is so special about this?
he wasn't the only person struggling to understand the second-hand value of a long-forgotten cartridge. Gimmick recently featured on a Swedish TV show, Bit a Bit, aka Trash or Treasure, which tasked contestants to estimate the value of antique objects.
Jag har aldrig i hela mitt liv hört talas om Mr. Gimmick. Så här kan jag säga. Det är inte en Super Mario Donkey Kong bland favoriternas spel. Det är ett okänt spel.
Det här är spelet som ingen ville ha.
But Nicholas wanted it. And he didn't just want the Swedish edition, he wanted the definitive release.
The Japanese version is the version you should have, because that has the extra sound chip. I found a Japanese seller and I won the game, and I mean, here it is.
But inside was more than just a cartridge.
Hi Nicholas, my name is Takumi Hamada. Thank you, Bid. I'm very happy. I want to be friends with people around the world on eBay. Please contact Bullshit. I always want 2 Japanese products. I help you anytime. Arigato. Yeah, he wanted to be friends with me on eBay. If you're out there, thank you very much for this amazing product, which does not contain any bullshit at all.
Gimmick was more than a game to Nicholas. It was nostalgia in its purest form, reminding him of the time he spent enjoying the game together with a childhood friend. And decades later, Gimmick was still helping Nicholas build friendships.
When I joined, it was just Nicholas and Gustav, and both of them were consultants. I was the only one working in-house. I was working solo on Wunderly. The reason I joined this company was because I wanted to work with Nicholas.
It was kind of like an Ocean 11 moment when we had finances. Like, I knew people in town and I knew people I wanted to work with and I knew people who wanted to work here.
The Gimmick 2 team was quickly being assembled, but after a music-based stumbling block, Nicholas perhaps obtained his greatest coup when it came to the sequel's soundtrack.
I reached out to the composer I used to work with. He had no connections to Gimmick, like he didn't know about it. I explained the vision to him and he's like, sounds really cool, but I'm having these projects, like I can't muster or do more. I mean, shoot for the stars, who do you want to work with? Like, which composer would you want to work on a game like this? It would be cool to like work with people like David Wise.
After already successfully getting the rights to his dream game, he boldly reached out to the iconic David Wise, the video game composer famous for soundtracks such as Donkey Kong Country and Battletoads, and Nicholas's dream composer. Perhaps to his surprise though, Wise was already familiar with the original Gimmick.
And I can remember listening to it thinking, why does that sound so much better than the tools I've got?
Gimmick's release in Japan wasn't just on your standard NES cartridge. Inside, along with all the action platforming goodness, was an extra sound chip. A sound chip that had never been seen on a NES cartridge before, and vastly improved its audio performance.
It's called the YM2149 chip, which was like an add-on into the cartridge, and it meant that you could play more channels and slightly different sounds. And because of the limitations of the NES, any extra was like gold, you know. Oh, wow, that sounds amazing. Instead of having 3 voices, all of a sudden you've got 6 voices, which makes a huge difference. It means that you can play chords and put a melody on there and put some drums on as well. In NES terms, that was great.
Nicholas and David both idolised Gimmick in their own way, but bonded over that passion. So the pitch for David to work on Gimmick 2 became a very easy yes.
I love Nintendo games and working on the platform. So it was an easy, yep, I want to be involved.
The pair immediately got to work on finding Gimmick 2's unique tone, trying to find the sweet spot between the original and the sequel's 2 countries of origin.
Since there's Scandinavian/Japanese theme going on, it would be amazing to do like Swedish historical instruments and stuff like that. So he wrote tunes that's being played by a guy on flute and a guy on like nyckelharpa and all those kinds of instruments.
He used this wonderful instrument called the nyckelharpa, which is sort of like a violin, but it's got these little wooden switches on them. It's got its own ethereal kind of sound that goes with it, and I was very, very keen to get that into the soundtrack, so we have used that quite extensively.
So it's amazing to hear these 80s, 90s tunes being remade on like Swedish medieval instruments. It's so bizarre. I remember me playing Donkey Kong Country and listening to the aquatic theme that he made, doing fan drawings when I was like in school about these games and stuff like that, like creating memories of this like legendary composer's tunes. Like it was just so amazing to be working with him. Like I'm 100% positive we live in a simulation right now because I got the IP I wanted, I got the composer I wanted. It's like, it's very weird. It's a weird feeling. Like I'm overjoyed, of course, but it's like, wow, this goes very well right now.
And just like that, disaster struck. In June 2023, Embracer Group, the parent company for Bitwave Games, announced a restructuring program, making significant cuts to their entire workforce. Unfortunately, the staff at Bitwave were one of the many casualties, losing half of their team in one fell swoop. Gimmick 2 was in jeopardy.
I mean, when the news hit, it was scary, of course, because I didn't know exactly how that would affect the studio, because it wasn't like I had a list of people that I knew would have to leave. But it was also, since it's a monetary situation, it kind of needed to happen quite fast.
It was one of the darkest days, I think, in the history of our company that I've been. I don't think we had such a huge setback before.
To create like a bond with people you are working with, so of course that's gonna affect you.
I was very confused, not like confused why it happened, but like confused, like, how do I handle this? How do I feel? What am I supposed to feel?
I'm trying to stay in the loop in the economics of the world, and so I wasn't surprised, but it's really sad to see a lot of talent go.
I mean, people who had to leave right now was a part of the company for 5 years, and there's also staff members that's been a part of the project from the beginning and very big leaders of the production. You kind of just have to shut off your human part of the situation, which is hard, but yeah.
Understandably, this was an extremely tough pill to swallow for the affected staff, but also slightly for Nicholas, who'd always thought of Embracer as the studio's savior. In a single moment, everything was turned upside down.
I'm not blaming Embracer for what happened, but it's external forces and how the industry is. So, I mean, my relationship with Embracer is the same, and it's still very good. They're just pivoting as well to just try to make the best out of the situation. And when the situation is what it is, it's some hard calls that needs to be made. Yeah.
6 months had passed since we first visited the studio, and in that time, the Embracer cuts weren't the only bad news for the production of Gimmick 2. Lead programmer Olaf Carlson also had to step away from the project due to burnout, only having to return out of necessity after the layoffs.
The fact that I only lasted 6 months before burning out, it was heartbreaking. I actually came back as part of the result of the layoffs, actually. The project I was on was also paused, so there wasn't any space for me there. So Nicholas approached me and was like, I know that you burnt out on this previous project and that you kind of didn't want to, hear about it anymore, but can you consider coming back? And I was like, yes, of course.
Gimmick 2 had stalled, and there was genuine fear that this labour of love might never make it to the finish line. But there was still an underlying determination from its leader to see it through, and that passion emanated through the entire studio.
I don't really want to work on something unless I feel like everyone around me really wants to do it. To have the CEO who wants to do it that much, of course there's a level of engagement that you otherwise wouldn't really get, I think.
I'm very comfortable working with him, and our views align quite often.
It's good that you have the passion for the project, of course, that will usually make it a better game, but it can also sometimes hinder. So I think that's a challenge for anyone who has a dream project like that, to make it right from the beginning, because you basically have one shot.
I want it to be the best game ever, and I want every idea that I have to be in the game, which makes it very, very hard to design a game like that.
I realized part of the reason that I did burn out was I don't think I loved the way the project was going. I really like, the old game, and I felt like it was going in a different direction.
Surprisingly, despite all the hurdles, Gimmick 2 got back on track fast, with Nicholas, in a desperate attempt to save his dream, introducing a pivot in production.
When the news broke, I think I was like, we can still do this game, but we need to pivot back to the roots a bit of the game and focus more on gameplay rather than one-offs and thematical experiences. It was pretty clear from the beginning what we needed to cut to make it, still make a great game and still make the game as long as we want it to be and as enjoyable as we want it to be.
It just feels more true. It feels more like a sequel. It doesn't just feel like something wearing the old game's skin. It feels like a true sequel to Gimmick.
We have new vision meetings and new ideas how to make the game with a smaller team. I think that have boosted the confidence a bit in the team too.
Everybody seems very positive about the game we are making right now, so that's a great thing.
We can actually finish this. This is doable.
Gimmick 2 is fast approaching. In fact, there's a good chance it's available for you to play right now. Despite the hardships, the whole project has been built with a consistent passion. Whether it was the love of the original soundtrack, the technology, the design, or just plain nostalgia, Bitwave Games has been structured on the foundation of Yumataro, and that love bleeds through every frame of the sequel.
The opportunity to work on Gimmick 2, it was like a once-in-a-lifetime experience, right? I think what will make it special is just the combination of what we're aiming for, a very tight, mechanically interesting and tight platforming game with amazing visuals, a beautiful soundtrack, composed by fucking David Wise of all people. How did we get David Wise? It's incredible.
I hope it will be a memorable experience with interesting puzzles that make you feel clever.
Oh, my hopes and dreams are that the game performs well and that people like the game because there's a whole lot of passion going into it.
I just hope that it's a fun game, that people enjoy it and it kind of lives on.
My hopes for the sequel is that it captures the same spirit of the original and has the same sort of care put into it to make it seem like sort of a world of wonder with these interesting enemies and characters you encounter along the way.
I hope people will find out more about the original one, because I still like the original one. I think this will be a much better game in more than one sense. But I hope people will play this, enjoy the game, go back and play the original game, and hopefully we will make a sequel to this one as well.
For better or worse, Gimmick 2 fulfills a lifelong ambition. Time will tell if the sequel will create its own lasting impact like its predecessor, or perhaps even exceed it. We don't know if Bitwave Games will thrive or fall under the weight of an ever-evolving industry. And we don't know if Gimmick will ever truly receive all the praise it so clearly deserves. What we do know is that Yumataro started a dream. A dream that built a studio, helped craft a vision decades in the making, and forged an assortment of beautiful friendships. Not bad for a barely released, forgotten 90s game about an anthropomorphic star-throwing green blob.
This game has always been a project of the studio's heart. We didn't pick this one to be the thing that would make us the richest studio in Gothenburg. It would more be setting a trend of how we make games and how we make high quality games. That's what we're trying to aim for here. As long as some people enjoy playing the game and get a player experience from it, then I'm happy.